Good evening. Where in the Bible could we find business principles specifically directed toward women conducting business? According to the Bible, uh, this is something that women can do and perhaps are even expected to do in some cases. But we fight a feeling that by many in culture that says, "Oh, the Bible is against women. It's a book for men, and it's not a book that it basically trivializes women and puts them down." And that's just a false claim. It's not true at all. In fact, we're going to look tonight at a poetic tribute from someone named King Lemuel in the very last chapter of the Book of Proverbs. Happy Mother's Day, everyone, and welcome to this broadcast of Your Proverbial Business. If you see the ticker tape down at the bottom, I'm going to ask you, if you would please, to just sign in the comment section. Give me a name and a city where you're located, and that'll let me know who's listening and who's online. And I would really, really appreciate that if you would do that. All right. So I got a funny message. Of course, if any of you spend any time on Facebook, you know that not everything on there is meant to be totally serious. Glad for that. Maybe we need a little less seriousness on there. I don't know. But I heard the following story posted by someone by the name of Don Ferris. I'm friends with him on Facebook. And he related the following story. Let me read this to you as I saw it. When a group of tourists visited a crocodile farm, the owner of the place launched a bold proposal. Quote, "Whoever dares to jump in, swim across to the coast, and survive, I'll give you $1 million," end quote. No one dared to move. There were crocodiles all around the place. And suddenly a man jumped in the water and desperately swam to shore while being chased by all these crocodiles. Well, with enormous luck and the admiration of everyone at the scene, the owner announced, "We have a brave winner." After collecting his reward, the couple returned to the hotel, and upon arrival, the manager told him he was very brave to jump. The man said, "I didn't jump. Someone pushed me." His wife smiled. The moral of the story: behind every successful man, there's a woman who pushes him. So he outswam those crocodiles, but it wasn't by his choice necessarily. I thought that was pretty funny. So what we want to do today is we want to look at these verses in Proverbs chapter 31, the last chapter of Proverbs. And although there's 9 verses at the beginning that introduce Lemuel and some things about Lemuel, we're basically going to focus on verses 10 to 31. And these are what is known as an acrostic, one of the methods of poetry in the book of Proverbs, well, all of the prophetic books, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. Sometimes the way they would do poetry is different than the way we would do poetry, and one of their methods was to start each caption or each phrase. We would call it a verse. We've numbered them and put verses on them, and to put each verse with a successive letter of the alphabet. So if it were English, it would be like the first line starts with A, the second line starts with B, the third line starts with C, except this is the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and so forth. So we want to just take a look at these verses and realize that part of what's going on here is it's these successive letters and a type of poetry, a type of Hebrew poetry. So let's read from the English Standard Version I'm reading from. You might have one that's similar but not precisely the same. It should say something fairly close to this. So let's start with the first letter of the alphabet, and we'll read these through. All right. So, well, for some reason, there it's straightened out. I started to say it's scrunched up for some reason. So here's our verses. And excellent. Let's just read through them all first, and then we'll come back and do a little assessment of each one. An excellent wife who can find, she is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like a ship, or like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides for food for her household and portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it, and with the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all of her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household, and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. The gates being the place where the political discussions of the day and decisions were made. So before we get into these verses, there's quite a bit there about women in business. Before we get into these verses individually, let me say, just to put things in perspective, that I don't really think this means that any single woman will perfectly carry out all of these things without any lapse or anything else. I mean, who among us just goes about all of our lives and never deviates from the plan, never does something we regret, never slacks when we should be pushing? And so I want you to understand these verses are really meant to be an encouragement, not a discouragement. So this lays out an ideal. A man is giving a tribute to a woman. King Lemuel is giving a tribute to all women and holding up this great high ideal. And if you take it that unless you do all of this stuff perfectly and never fail, you're a failure, you've missed the point. The point is, here is something that is desirable. Here is something to ascertain, to attempt to attain. But take it as, this is the ideal, and there will be times of failure. There will be times of slip-ups. There will be times of laxness. And I don't want anyone saying, well, I can't live up to that ideal, so I'm not even going to try to live up to any of it. That's not the point. All right, so let's go down through these and look at them as encouragement. This will be some of what you will want to make sure that you are at least setting out in front of yourself as the goal. All right, so it starts out by talking not so much about a mother but a wife, but the idea is that it's the woman of business. All right, and so the letter of the alphabet, as we move through it, talks about her value. She's more precious than jewels, and that's something that I think most women would say, that that is a feeling they strive for, um, to be honored and to be what's the word I'm looking for, to be sought after and to be valued. That's what the verse 10 is saying. Um, if she's a married woman, verse 11 kind of makes an assumption here that she has a husband. He trusts in her, and she's moving the ball forward down the field, if you will. He will have no lack of gain. Um, and so in verses 10 to 13, which includes 12, she does him good and not harm all the days of her life, and she seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. So here in verse 13, we're seeing someone who seeks out a way to bring in a little extra income and make her life profitable and benefit the entire household. She doesn't wait for something to fall in her lap. She seeks. She goes out and seeks wool and flax and works not with reluctant hands, but with willing hands. And that's a very good key here. So we'll just work our way through each one of these one verse at a time. And hopefully you'll pick up a few tips. We're not going to belabor the point and stretch it out here because I'm always open to email questions and people who make in the comment section put questions in there. And if you do have a question, please put the letter Q at the beginning so that it helps me spot the ones that are questions. And so you put Q and then type whatever your question is, or T, this is a takeaway from today. And those kinds of things help me to know how the audience is responding here. So verse 14, here's one of the characteristics that we might want to strive for, and that is she thinks big and extends her reach. So verse 14, she is like the ships of the merchant brings her food from afar. So she has a network of people, and that network can reach out and include a lot of people and perhaps even a lot of distance. And of course, today with so many online businesses, there are women that have a global reach, and they're reaching into many countries, and they network with many people. Before that, maybe some of you tied into business. I have a friend that just went big on QVC, a television program that helps people, women in business, find people who want their products, and people who watch that show find things that they would be interested in purchasing. And she has a cookie business, and she just went big on QVC. And I saw pictures of the trucks getting ready to ship the packaged cookies after she did that. So ways to just reach out. It's not just the neighbor across the street, although it does include the neighbor across the street or wherever your neighbor might be. But verse 14 talks about how she's reaching out from afar. Now, 15, she rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. Now, I realize that many people say, I'm just not a morning person and I don't like to get up early. I think what the verse is really trying to say is this is not a person who squanders time and opportunities but gets out ahead of things. So if I were to summarize verse 15, I would say that a good woman of business is someone who gets a jump start or a head start on others and sees to it that things are as they should be. And there are times when you will have to push yourself, and there are times when you will have to make sacrifice. But I don't want anyone to get the idea this means you're not allowed to ever sleep, and you can't have a weekend, and you can't have a vacation, and you can't. I mean, you have to understand, in the Jewish culture, they shut completely down one day out of every 7. And so there's rest built into this, but it also is pointing in verse 15 to the one who's motivated. There's a motivation there. All right, I need to move on because of time. I don't want to take all night on Mother's Day. Um, so let's take a look at verse 16. In verse 16, she considers a field and buys it, and the fruit of her hands plants a vineyard. So this is a woman who's learning how to make wise investments and then knows how to work those investments. So the King Lemuel, the words here in Proverbs, it says she's looking at a field and she knows exactly the kind of field she wants, and she buys the one that where she can plant a vineyard and then begin to obviously make gain off of that the fruit of that vineyard. All right, so wise investments. They know, yes, I should invest in this. No, that's not a good investment. And that takes work, and that takes study, and that takes training, and probably mentoring by someone who can help you know those things. But this is a woman, and I don't know if at this point, if you're shocked yet that these verses are in the Bible telling women this is what it's okay to do. If that's, what you're interested in, go for it. All right. Now, so let's talk about verse 17 for a moment. So this is not quite, but approximately halfway through the list. And I want us to take a moment right now and realize that verse 17 is she practices some self-care. So I don't want any woman to hear this and say, boy, I'm just being pushed beyond what I'm capable of and I can't do anything. Look at verse 17. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. So in our world, this is someone who, let me just click on this little footnote here. And the footnote says, she girds her loins. All right, that's a Hebrew phrase. When they needed to run, obviously they would tie up their outer garment. And you remember when Peter needed to swim, he had to do the same thing. And so, so she dresses herself is the way we would say it. And she's taking care of herself. She's not just letting herself go. And again, this is not to put extra pressure, but to take some pressure off. Not everything is about profit. Not everything is about other people. Not everything is about giving others and not doing for yourself. No, she actually does for herself. And in the process of doing for others, she's doing for herself. And in the process of doing for herself, she's doing for others. And so, as far as I'm concerned, that workout routine that you get involved in, that time you spend at the gym, that mani-pedi, all of those kinds of things are a part of what a woman in business does. And so we'll keep all of that in mind. And then it also says, she perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. So this is about some forethought and some planning ahead. And of course, we do from time to time get caught by surprise, but there are things we could have known. For example, when you're in the heat of summer and the temperatures are very high, it's still fairly common knowledge that, half a year away is going to be colder weather. If you're north of the equator, summer is in those months between, I don't know, so let's just say June, July, August, September, along in there. And if you're south of the equator, it's the opposite. We're having summer when they're having winter and vice versa. But there are some things you can foresee. And that's what this woman is doing right here in verse 18. She is perceiving that her merchandise is profitable. So maybe in the summertime, she's making plans for Christmas decorations that will sell closer to Christmas. Or I don't know, I'm just trying to think of things. Her lamp doesn't go out at night, which means she's not running short when she needs it. All right, let's look at verse 19. I'm trying to move fairly quickly here. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. So these are the tools of sewing and weaving. In those days, they would bring the wool in. You remember she back in the other verses, back up at verse 13, she went and got wool, and now she takes that wool and gets it ready for the spindle or the weaving. I don't even know all the terms that go for how the weaving was done. I'm not an expert in that area, but she's doing all of those things here, and she numbers 19, verse 19. She uses her skills for profit, so she has the ability to do the spinning and the weaving and the things that it takes for clothes making or whatever her skill happens to be, and that's what we're seeing here. So let's look at verse 20. She doesn't forget the poor, and she's a very generous person. So it's not all about just gathering for herself. She's making a profit, but she opens her hand to the poor. And that doesn't necessarily mean that she just gives it away. Maybe she offers them a job. Maybe she trades their labor for their own profit because that's what they're interested in. So, or maybe she does make a gift. So we want to just see that she's got a generous heart. And then in verse 21, you want to make sure that she is thinking about future needs and preparing for the needs of those who are depending on her. She's not afraid of that snow, but she sees to it that the clothing is there. Now, in our day, that's probably more purchasing a coat rather than, making a coat. But the idea is there, and it's there for the woman in business. She's got it planned out. She doesn't wake up one day and say, boy, I'm really cold, and I didn't think about the fact it was going to get cold this winter. No, that's not her. She's thinking about future needs and making preparation. Verse 22, she experiences success, and she's allowed to live and enjoy that success. Verse 22 says she makes bed coverings for herself, and her clothing is nice. It's fine linen and purple, which is the color of royalty. She's living a life that shows that she's making it. It's not a completely selfless approach. She's generous to others. She takes care of those for whom she has responsibility, but there's also plenty there where she's seeing the benefit as well. Her husband is known in the gates. Again, that's where the elders would sit and make the important decisions, and she's very much a part of that and pushing him in where the crocodiles are, or something like that. So that's a very important thing as well. Verse 23, that's if she is married, all right? Verse 24, excuse me, I keep saying number. She sells things that she herself creates and manufactures. She makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. So she has goods, she has wares. In this case, she manufactured them herself. And maybe you wind up in charge of, as my friend is, making cookies, or what it is that you are able to produce. Because business is really about producing something and then exchanging it for a profit. And that's what we want to understand here. And this man is praising any woman who's able to go out and do this, and holding up this very great high ideal that she's able to do that. Now, according to the next verse, she enjoys freedom from fear. All right, strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. So we want to make sure that we understand that she doesn't fear the future. She laughs. She laughs at the time to come. And that means that she's made proper preparation. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. So she shares the wealth of experience and knowledge that she has with others, and she sees that they benefit. She mentors other women around her and helps them get going in business, perhaps, or gives them a job in her own business. All of that is very much an important part of the woman of business. All right. So, and then the last one is again going back to the concept of diligence rather than just a lazy person who's wasting their life. She's held up as someone, verse 27, who looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. The bread of idleness, that's in my mind, the joke is, sitting in front of soap operas and eating bonbons. And that's not exactly a productive way to spend life. It's not that there might not be an occasion where that happens, but we're talking about making that a day-to-day, everyday practice, and that's just not good. Now, we're going to wrap up with verses 28 to 31, kind of all summarized together, because what happens is those who are closest to her see that she is what a woman is held up as a good ideal, and so those closest to her begin to say nice things about her, her husband, her children, all other folks. Verse 30 says that she's not trying to get charm and beauty to be what she's not chasing after that. She's chasing after a fearing of the Lord and being fruitful. In verse 31, she gets to enjoy the fruit of her hands, and her works praise her in the gates. Now, here at Your Proverbial Business, we do not just tell people, you should think up some business. We actually try to help people do that. And if you are interested in being a part of some coaching or some help in business or whatever it is you might want, get a hold of me. The email is steve@yourproverbialbusiness.com, and give me a shout out, and we'll see how we can help you and how we can make it work together. All of this was meant for you to enjoy Mother's Day and to see a goal to strive for, and hopefully you saw it as something that encouraged and motivated you, and you didn't take it as, oh boy, I'm really not able to do all of that, so I'm falling short and woe is me. That's not the point of these verses. The point of these verses are, look what you could do. Give it a try, and hopefully that's exactly what you'll do. So we're going to kind of start to wrap up here, and I always like to close in a time of prayer and then a blessing as well. And so let's just ask the Lord to bless mothers everywhere and to allow them to experience these joys and be motivated to try some new things, and not to get down on themselves, but just to hold a goal in front of them that they strive for. Lord, would you bless them in that way? And now a blessing, one that I will make up on my own and not be taken from Scripture, and that is, may the Lord bless your energies and your efforts. May He show you His path, and may you be encouraged not only to follow that path, but may you experience the fruit that comes from that path. God bless you, and enjoy the rest of